The big picture, my heresy of the week. We are still, or maybe just beginning, at the fallout of the greatest atrocity in history, European colonialism. It was, of course, in their own eyes and in their generational wealth, their bank accounts, the making of them, and their greatest achievement. In fact, the greatest by anybody ever in their own eyes. It seems we are now in the beginnings of the unmaking. Kant, around Kant, he didn't say it, but it was said of him, quote, "The moral foundations of ethics and religion are not inconsistent with science," end quote. That's impressive, if I knew what it meant. As I watched the documentary, I was aware that he and the other famous, very bright fellows around him certainly articulated what had probably been understood for thousands of years, that the source of goodness was, or the source of morality and goodness and really human identity was in faith in God. Because those qualities, the goodness and the morality, need sources according to these people. And they spent long hours being trained and told and taught, and so that any of us would, at the end of however many years of that kind of schooling, would be pretty certain that the source of our human goodness must be scripture, patriarchy, all flowing from an all-powerful, benevolent God. That's as good a story as any. And then there's the other. In the violence that surrounds these Islamic terrorism or the Discovery Doctrine or what's going on in Palestine at the moment, covering all three, just to be fair, there is violence everywhere, but these are three violences attached to these massive religions. The core of them is righteousness. My God is the true God, right? And you who don't believe, you idol worshiper, are my enemy. And to save one of mine, I will kill 10 of yours, and my God will consent. And from Deuteronomy to unequally yoked, this is laid out for us. These faith systems and the civilizations steered by them dehumanize the non-believer in their God and demonize them. And if we went back to the day in the 1930s when Israel was created in the minds of Christians as a haven for Jews, all one needed to do was to move the Muslims from the land the Christians held as mandate to perform this apparently Christian act. And that was justified in the minds of the people involved, except for the Muslims who were being, the Muslims who were being moved. And then the civilization that shot west as out of a cannon in 1492 happened at exactly the same time that it clamped down on the other in Europe. The Inquisition was in full swing. Muslims and Jews were expelled from Spain, where they had lived moderately peacefully together for about 600-700 years. Catholicism was making its move. It was heading out to convert, enslave, exploit, and often murder non-believers. And I have to say this, at every step, I I do not for a second think, except maybe the Inquisition, where they should have had second thoughts. But in the great conquistador, the conquerings of the rest of the world, and I think they believed they were doing good works. And I have to give them leeway for that. We're all possibly that gullible. And I'm just saying that now we're finally running into the consequence. And that the original stuff was almost more honest. What it has coalesced into in the last 100 years, definitely since the Enlightenment, Kant, is a sort of is a very strange and pious superiority. And this is the most dangerous of all. It was in the crucible of the notion of supremacy during, really, around 1492, just before and then after, and then and then of course you run into dear old Martin Luther rebelling against the holiest of holy, and then so becoming heretic, and then it just went on and on and on and on and on. This schism. But I want to just articulate that at the beginning of this thing. This predisposition as superior among the European was so deep then. To be a non-Catholic in those days was to be evil and dismissible. And that is still deep. Within 100 years, Protestantism challenged the old sect on the same grounds, the true faith, and Europe did unto its own what it had done unto others. And when the sectarian violence was modified, as per Northern Ireland, finally, maybe, the righteous fight continued within and without. The appetite of these monotheisms seems unslakable. And I think that's because they're deeply insecure. Is anybody making that claim, identifying themselves as inherently superior, will be insecure because they'll know in their souls it's tosh. While holding the barricade against foreign invaders, the US has slowly begun to take aim at its own, finding evildoers within and without. The arguers for Israel imagine America, I've encountered this a lot, and England Zionistically. They imagine that as an American or as an Englishman, I think of England as a haven for myself, they assume Christian self, which is the motive, in case you missed it, of the Ku Klux Klan, the Reform Party in England, and AFD in Germany. And the US imagines Zionism as their own manifest destiny, their deepest myth. And as I watch, I see humans within these righteous clusters as very, very uneasy. Their faiths have fulfilled so much in them, have claimed so much of themselves, have defined them so clearly they can claim to brother or sister. They can claim to brother or sisterhood with the rest. Their self-determination, which is actually group determination, have so consumed them, so identified them, that inhuman acts become second nature. All the horrific isms that boiled over in the 20th century after seething for 1,000 years, the legacy of genocide, become habitual. And which it was, if you count Africa, Australia, and North and South America, which Europe is naturally loath to do. They only count the Holocaust. The capacity to make this cabal over as the best is just beyond us. We have just run up on a new round of blaming Russia and China. The accusations fly as fevers rise, as the realization of monotheist Western depravities become undeniable, and the iPhones challenge the propaganda we call history. The behavior of ICE is not new. It is as ancient as the Praetorians. Colonialism had a baby, and they called it globalism. And it only took a minute. Colonialism wanes in the early to mid 20th century, and within a generation, globalism. Some people, some myths, some marketings, same people, same myths, same marketings trickle down. British East India Company move over. Here is Goldman Sachs, the World Bank, the IMF, Halliburton. And none of it could be sustained but by a community who believed in their hearts, had invented the science, the myth, and the religion to prove it, that they were born genetically, racially, and civilizationally to rule the rest, the West. And even with the best woke liberal will in the world, they can't shake it. Here it is every day in front of us, and still we cannot acknowledge. We cannot say we are wrong. It is in ourselves. The left of the West follows precisely the right's plodding goose steps. ICE are animals. Republicans are another race. They are idol worshippers. They are everything we are not. But we were all born in the same manger. To the Christian, Judeo-Muslim, I, who believe other than you, have no scripture commanding my goodness, my behaviors, my food, my sexual desires, my loyalty, your incapacity to recognize me as equal, as valid, and as human as you, because I have no notion of obedience, is a terrible flaw in your myth. Until you recognize this and acknowledge the mess you have made, I suggest you keep quiet and allow people whose belief structures, if they exist at all, they are not necessarily, allow for adulthood. They are children of no God. They have grown up.